I'm Linda van Tilburg for Biznews. Change Starts Now is a political party that was launched in December 2023 by Roger Jardine, a former Director General and banker, to be an alternative political option for South Africans who wants change in the country. The party's manifesto was launched yesterday in Soweto and it's called the Change Charter. And what is particularly interesting to the business community is the idea of a Marshall Plan or a wartime strategy to reconstruct South Africa. And with me in the studio, I'm happy to have Roger Jardine. Roger, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I think we can sort of go back a little bit on why you're doing this, why you're entering the messy world of politics. But I think what our business community is most interested in is this 500 billion regrow plan of South Africa. So can we start with that and tell us what are you intending with that?
No, thank you very much, Linda. I think the key point to land here is that we are sitting in a social situation that's untenable. We're seeing globally people are losing hope and faith in democracy. And in fact, earlier this year, $250 billion billionaires and millionaires signed a pledge asking regulators to increase their taxes because they saw it as a way to assuage this pressure on democracy. And we feel that here in South Africa. And we cannot have a situation where we regard this problem as a linear problem. Let's first fix the economy and then we can take care of our people. If we don't do it concurrently, we're going to have a different problem. So we use the Marshall Plan analogy because if you look at all the measures in South Africa, in terms of the number of people dying, it's like we're in a war zone here. If you look at people who are going to bed hungry or starving. So we need that intervention. And at the same time, our balance sheet of SA Inc. is under stress. So we cannot do these things concurrently. And so this plan seeks to intervene urgently. And what we're saying is we need common cause between the rich and the poor at this moment in our country's history. So we have come up with a temporary levy. It's temporary. People are jaded about paying tax because they wonder where's their tax money going. They cannot see the benefits of it. So we have structured it as a ring-fenced fund, which we'll have overseen by an independent panel of people with respect, a chairperson who is respected and has integrity, and then you can actually see where your money is going. The flip side of this is, as we continue to decline, the chances of increasing and sustainable tax increases are on the horizon as the gap between our ability to fund social, constitutionally guaranteed social protections and our balance sheet. We're just seeing that gap opening all the time. So we think it is a short-term intervention. We intend to stick to the 3 years. We've modeled it very, very precisely with a team of experts and advisors, and we've come up with a 500 billion rand amount, which we think will be quite substantive in this environment.
I think you've just addressed one of the concerns is because people are always worried when, there's money again, another chance for corruption. So this ring fencing, how would you do that?
Yeah, so the Constitution says taxes received goes to the National Revenue Account unless there's an act of Parliament. So we intend to govern this by creating its own act in terms of how this money is spent. And then, as I said, we will get South Africans in a true public-private partnership mode with a chair that South Africans respect. Those projects will be agreed and made public. And if you're a contributor, you will be able to see where this basket of money is going. Everyone is very mindful of the fact that taxpayers are really upset about the way public resources are being used. And so we wanted to address that up front.
But the tax base is shrinking. And they are under severe stress. I mean, how do you think it will go down if you say, okay, well, just pay tax for another 3 year, a bit of extra? Do you think people would accept that?
Well, we say in the manifesto that we're going to have a series of conversations with people, and especially people affected by this. Look, it's choices, right? I mean, our economy is shrinking. We're sitting at 1%. Load shedding is carrying on. We know that if we fix load shedding, our GDP growth can be 2.5% instead of the paltry 1% that it is. And the question is, why isn't that happening? It's because of political will. And so with this social solidarity fund, remember we're saying we have to make common cause amongst all South Africans. We feel that it will unlock the economy. Companies should be making more money, with that comes the prospect of reduced taxes. So it's a trade off in the short term for our long term sustainability. But at this rate, we'll probably have to borrow more. We'll have more social unrest as the government fails to provide social protections. Our public hospitals are a shambles because of budget cuts. Doctors aren't being employed, that sort of thing. And so I don't think you can have one part of society standing on the sidelines while the majority of the society is imploding. And so it's really saying, let's look to the future together.
Can you break down those taxes for us? So corporation tax goes to, what is it, 32.2%? Can you break this down for us?
Yeah. So the corporate tax it will be an increase of 4.2% over the 3 years, and that goes to 32.2%. We model it for individuals earning more than 1.8 million rand. They'll go from 45 to 49 in terms of that marginal rate. We have the 1% on retirement funds, and then a wealth tax of 1.5% for everyone who has assets over 40 million rand.
So how do you think this will go down with investors? Investors are always worried about, these extra things that tend to creep in, and normally they're not investor friendly. Aren't you worried that would put people off more from investing into South Africa?
Look, I think this is a global debate. We would say obviously, change starts now is investor friendly. This is about guaranteeing that South Africa becomes a stable country with strong economic growth. We have a series of value traps in our system at the moment. This plan goes hand in hand with a very strong role for the private sector. I'll tell you exactly where. So our state-owned enterprises have been an enormous drain on the fiscus here. We're saying we will make sure that we restructure them. We've estimated through the underlying profitability of a well-run SOE, maybe here we're talking about Transnet and Eskom, we should be able to introduce leverage of about R1 trillion. We're also saying when it comes to the ports, for example, that we get stuck in these privatization debates in South Africa. Change Starts Now unashamedly says there is a strong role for the private sector here, and we must tap into that. And so, for example, currently ships aren't going through the Suez Canal. We cannot capitalize on that as they pass around the Cape. We'd be better off if we gave ports to private operators to run for an agreed period. We think maybe it's more like 30 years, and then hand it back to the state. But in the meantime, we are mobilizing private capital to create jobs, to unlock our economy, to say to our farmers and our manufacturers and other producers, your product will get to the port for export. So this isn't simply a social solidarity fund on its own. It goes hand in hand with a strong role for the private sector to further unlock the economy.
Can we look at some of the other policies that a business community would, those were your former colleagues, the business community, what they would be interested in? You mentioned what about SOEs with privatization, you mentioned corruption. What about black empowerment? What is your policy on black empowerment?
So we think that we believe one of the biggest problems we now currently facing is how procurement has been completely misapplied on big contracts to provide water, other bulk infrastructure. There's been this view, if you take three guys and you give them a big contract and they make a lot of money, you can call it inclusion. And one economist point out, we don't actually measure how many people have been excluded when these things do not arrive or they fail to be delivered. And so it's going to be very important because the public have had enough also. There's so many failed water projects in particular where they've been awarded and people have been paid, but there's been no service provided. So we will have to focus more on value for money. Governments across the world use public procurement to drive government policy, but here it has failed. We can see there's been no benefit to it. There's currently a preferential procurement bill that's in Parliament. We will withdraw that bill. It is just not on the right track. It doesn't deal with the value for money. It allows politicians and their families to participate in public procurement. We will have to change that so that the right service providers who know what they're doing get these public monies to deliver services to the people of this country.
So are you saying that black empowerment will continue but in another form?
I think we'll have to see. Look, we're 30 years into democracy. There is as I said, governments across the world leverage procurement around strategic objectives. I'm saying this current application has failed. There are bona fide South African companies who have been around for 50, 70 years with black empowerment shareholders who have put risk capital into those companies. They don't get these contracts, under the banner that these are old white companies. And it's said I come from that sector. So I know that there are bona fide black investors in this country who are invested in blue chip companies who should be eligible to be providing these services. So I think it's the lens through which you see how to apply this that's really the issue. But I'm very clear that it has been wrongly applied, and the outcome has been negative for the people of this country.
Well, you formed this party very shortly before a general election, so there's not a long runway for you to what kind of impact could you make on your own, and are you thinking of possible working with other parties?
So firstly, I think we wanted to sketch a vision for South Africa, which I think through this manifesto we are presenting a roadmap which is quite different to other parties in that we're going into the detail. We're actually saying in this plan that we think we can increase infrastructure as a percentage of GDP to 22% and create 5 million jobs. That isn't the thumbs up. We've looked at the NDP, we've modeled it, we think it can happen. It requires the political will. And we introduced the Social Solidarity Fund. So we part of shaping a trajectory for South Africa, first of all, in terms of vision. When it comes to coalitions, one of the problems we've seen, particularly at local government level, is that it has tended to be about sharing the spoils. You get this position, I get that position. We want to engage in a coalition discussion on the basis of what is the vision, the platform, and the projects that we want to see implemented for South Africa. And so, yes, we're open to talking to other parties as well, and we're putting our best foot forward. We're often told that we are late in the game and the elections are looming, but we are focusing on getting our message to the South African people.
So what makes you different from the other opposition parties? When I open my ballot, it seems a 3-page ballot paper or a very long one, and I think, okay, definitely enough, I don't want to vote for the ANC anymore, but how do I choose between these guys? What makes you different?
Well, I think it's very clear that South Africa needs a turnaround plan. We need a strong management team. We need clear ideas. Everyone can say we want to fix crime. Our manifesto says exactly what we think it will take. We talk about making sure that the National Prosecuting Authority is both prosecutorially independent and administratively independent. I don't think many South Africans actually realize how that compromises their ability to perform their task. We talk about reinstating specialized crime units. We have very specific ideas on the healthcare, for example. We talk about how we want to empower local hospitals so that they can service people a lot better. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to get into the mind of a citizen so that they can see the differentiator here is that we are focusing on the fix, and we are presenting how to fix South Africa. And that's what we need to get across to our citizens.
Well, you've also conducted opinion polls. Which voters do you think you can lure to your party? Would it be disgruntled ANC people? Would it be the people who can't decide who they're going to vote for, or don't think, there's no point in voting?
So our research is showing that South Africans are ready for change. Change is the most common word used in South Africa. And there are various categories of voters here. You have people who have voted a particular way over many years. They've either just stopped voting, maybe some of them have changed their vote. There are voters who register but never bother to vote. And then there's new voters. And so that's basically the 3 buckets of citizens who need to engage in the voting process. And what we're saying to them is, we're now sitting here 30 years later. There have been voting patterns over the past 3 decades. Those voting patterns have had consequences for South Africa. And, in thinking about who you would vote for, think about the consequences of your vote. It's a very important moment in South Africa's history to change course.
So one question, one topic that always comes up when you are discussed or some of the other parties is the funding of the parties. And some people asked me, I should ask you, whether you represent an agreed position for the business community, or is your initiative purely private?
When it comes to donor funding of parties, I'm very clear. The only thing we can guarantee to anyone who wants to fund our vision is that we will work very hard to foster social stability and an environment in which your business can grow. I've read that there are still strings attached and an agreed agenda. Can you imagine if there was such an agenda, we'd be talking about a social solidarity fund today? I mean, this is based purely on the solutions that this country requires, based on our view. So no, there's no agreed position. We will engage with any South African in any South African business that pays their taxes, that is legal, and that is invested in South Africa's future.
And people have mentioned that there's deep pockets behind you. Is that true?
Yeah, I also read about that. There's no billion rand. I've read about this billion rand. We now registered as a political party. We are legally obliged to disclose our funding, which we will do through the IEC process, and it will become public. And then you will see that there's no billion rand.
Roger, I just want to ask you final questions. Why would a banker, a nice guy in a suit, why would you get involved in the messy world of politics?
I come from a family, almost 3 generations of being involved in social and political affairs in South Africa. And just over many years, agonizing about the direction our country is heading in. And, feeling in particular, last year, it took me in the better part of last year to decide that I would step away into a very uncertain world, a world that I don't really know. I'm not a career politician. And to add my voice as a South African to the direction in which I think this country should be going. And that's my motivation. And over and above that, without trivializing the solutions, some of the things we need to do in South Africa, it's not rocket science. The ideas are there. We need the political will and we need the management for that. And so, I've stepped into this terrain and I'm ready to work with a range of people. And I think there are more South Africans who want to work together than there are those who want to divide us. And that's the energy that I would like to be a part of.
And would you like to be president of the country?
We do not have a presidential election system in South Africa. So you can't run for president. What anyone can do is to put their ideas out there and to talk to other parties and to talk about the leadership and the type of leadership this country requires. I have certainly stepped into the terrain and I'd like to be part of that conversation. And whether it's in politics or not, I'll be part of that conversation. So what I do know is that South Africa needs leaders who see the people. I've been going around this country talking to people at taxi ranks, flower markets, SASSA grant holders, etc. The lack of dignity, the way people's dignity has been eroded, especially in the past 10 years, it really makes me angry. And I think we need to find solutions collectively and individually. So, yes, I'm solely focused on how I can help to fuel that discussion on leadership in this country.
Roger Jardine, thank you so much. Thanks for speaking to me.
Thank you very much.